Imagine you are sitting in a conference room. It's like a Tuesday afternoon, the air conditioning is humming, and everyone is staring at a slide deck that is clearly objectively optimistic about a project that is in reality.
Completely burning to the ground.
Yes, burning to the ground, and the manager is smiling, your colleagues are nodding politely. It is the classic peace at all costs scenario.
Right, the social contract in action. Don't rock the boat, just survive the meeting.
Exactly. But for you, something is happening physically. You aren't just annoyed. You feel this rising heat in your chest. Your heart starts hammering against your ribs.
Like a visceral reaction.
Right. It's an irresistible need to stop the charade. You feel like you have to physically flip the table over just to get everyone to look at the actual problem.
And if that sensation of being physically unable to tolerate polite silence sounds familiar, or if you know someone who seems to have a biological allergy to ignoring the elephant in the room, you are going to love this deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening up the files of the Max Energy ME80 personality system. We're exploring a profile that is often labeled as intense, aggressive, or emotional.
But as we're going to find out, is actually the necessary spark for progress.
Exactly. We are talking about the FASN, also known as the emotional breaker.
The emotional breaker.
No.
And right off the bat, we really need to address that name. Because in the Max Energy system, names are descriptive of energy function. They aren't moral judgments.
Yeah, because breaker sounds a bit destructive, like, if I get this result, am I the villain?
Not at all. Think of it this way. They aren't breaking things that are working. They are breaking stagnation. They are breaking the silence that allows rot to set in.
Ah, okay. That makes a lot of sense.
This profile is defined by high energy, high emotion, and a profound, almost biological need for truth.
So before we get into the mechanics of how they do this, let's look at the core identity, the hero section of the report. There is a defining declaration here that feels straight out of a movie trailer.
It really does. The quote is, "At critical moments, I use emotion to push the table, dragging unfairness from shadows onto the stage."
Dragging unfairness from shadows onto the stage, that is a powerful image.
It is.
It implies that the unfairness is already there, right? Hiding in the dark. And the FASN is just the one turning on the floodlights.
Exactly. The report defines their core style as direct voice raising. They ignite through emotion. Because to a FASN, silence isn't golden.
Silence is complicity.
Precisely. If you see a problem, a structural unfairness, a lie, a danger, and you say nothing, in their eyes, you are actively helping the system fail.
That's a heavy burden to carry. It means they can never really just check out.
They can't. And this ties into their control mechanism. Their control philosophy is built on a global view that demands integrity.
A global view, so they're seeing the whole board.
Right. They believe that the only way to fix a system is to force the truth into the center of the room, no matter how messy or loud that process becomes. I like to think of them as the immune system of the group.
I love that analogy. The immune system raises the body temperature, causes a fever to kill the virus. It's totally uncomfortable, but it saves your life.
Exactly. The FASN brings the fever.
Okay, so that is the why. Now I want to get into the how. The Max Energy system is famous for its energy matrix, the internal wiring diagram of a person.
Right, the architecture.
Yeah. How do we get from sitting quietly to flipping the table?
It is all about the layering of their internal energy. The report breaks this down into 4 distinct layers. We have the IP, IQ, EQ, and manifestation layers.
And for the FASN, the interplay here creates a massive amount of internal pressure, doesn't it?
Huge pressure. Let's peel these layers back, starting from the bottom. The foundation. The IP layer, or inner value layer.
The IP layer is like the engine room. For the FASN, the definition here is, let me quote this, energy drives initiation.
Right. This means their baseline state is high idle. They're always generating the impulse to start, to move, to do something.
They don't have a neutral gear that sits still easily.
No, the engine is always revving. And then we move up to the second layer, the IQ layer. Now, usually when people hear IQ, they think logic, math, spreadsheets.
But in the ME80 system, it's completely different.
Very different. Here, the IQ layer is the emotional activation layer. Its function is structure and principled judgment.
Structure and principled judgment. That sounds really technical. What does that actually look like in the real world?
Think of it as a high-sensitivity scanner. It's not looking for spelling errors on a document. It's scanning for ethical structural integrity.
Oh, wow.
So when a FASN walks into a room, this layer is subconsciously asking, is the hierarchy fair here? Is that person being treated with dignity? Is the core principle being upheld?
It's almost like a built-in lie detector.
More like a justice detector.
Yeah.
And it is incredibly fast. They spot the crack in the foundation before anyone else even knows the building is shaking.
Okay, so we have a high-power engine, which is the IT layer, and a scanner that just detected a major problem, the IQ layer. Now we hit the third layer, the EQ layer, or decision calculation layer.
This is where the drama really happens. The definition for EQ here is emotional containment and stability.
Containment. Wait, aren't they known for not containing things?
That is the paradox. They are actually trying to... The EQ layer is like a dam trying to hold back a flood.
Oh, I see.
The FASN is working very hard internally to calculate, can I hold this in? Is this the appropriate time? Should I say something? They really don't want to be the person who ruins the party.
But the pressure from below, the engine revving and the scanner blaring, it's just too strong.
Exactly. The drive to initiate that IP and the outrage at the unfairness from the IQ builds up massive pressure against that EQ dam.
Which naturally leads us to the final layer, manifestation.
Yes. Energy released outward. The dam breaks. The containment fails. And because it was held back so tightly, it doesn't come out as a trickle.
It comes out as a burst, a table flip.
A total burst.
That makes so much sense. It explains why it can feel so explosive to the people around them. It's not that they went from 0 to 100 in a second. It's that they were holding back 100 until the seal broke.
Correct. And this brings us right into the deep analysis section of the report, specifically regarding their inner traits. We have to talk about the emotional trigger.
Right. The report says, moved first, then action follows.
This is a critical distinction. For many people, the sequence of processing a situation is observe, think, feel, act.
But for the FASN, the sequence is feel, act, then think.
Yes. The body knows before the brain does. The report states that their inner mechanism uses emotion as the activation key. They feel the injustice physiologically.
Like their face getting hot or their stomach turning.
Exactly. They are the canary in the coal mine, gasping for air before the miners even smell the gas.
But in a corporate world, or even just in polite society, we're constantly told that emotion is bad. Don't get emotional, be logical.
And that is the ultimate trap for the FASN. If they try to suppress that emotion, they are literally turning off their radar. The report is very clear on this. Emotion is not a burden for them. It is the fuel. It is the data.
However, there is a cost to this. We have to address the shadow side. The report calls this the shadow blind spot, specifically firepower overload.
This is where the core strength becomes a severe weakness. When that emotional pressure creates a breach, the report says rationality gets squeezed to the margin.
Squeezed to the margin. I've actually seen that look in people's eyes. It's like the logic center just went completely offline.
It's a power surge. The emotion is so intense that it fries the circuits for nuance. They might be 100% right about the facts that the project is failing, for example.
But because they scream it, or because they are visibly shaking with anger, the message gets totally lost. People focus on the fire, not what the fire is illuminating.
Precisely. And then comes the hangover, the impact repair cycle.
Let's unpack that. The impact repair cycle.
This is honestly the most painful part for the FASN. After the explosion, the adrenaline crashes, the logic comes back online. And they look around at the scorched earth and the stunned faces of their colleagues.
And the guilt sets in.
Massive, crushing guilt. They oscillate between, I was right to be angry, and why am I such a mess? Why can't I control myself?
That sounds like an internal war.
It is. And it consumes a huge amount of their energy. They spend half their time fighting the injustice and the other half apologizing for how they fought it.
It sounds exhausting for them and obviously for the people around them.
It leads to what the report calls relationship exhaustion. And this is a really big bid, but there's a reason people stick around.
Let's talk about that social relationship dynamic. The report calls their style direct fire voice.
It means they have no filter, but also they play no games. FASN types are often incredibly warm, genuine, and fiercely protective.
They just refuse to participate in false peace.
False peace, such a great term from the system.
You know the vibe. Everyone is smiling at the dinner party, but Uncle Bob is being cruel to the waiter. Most people will just look down at their plate.
But the FASN, they can't. They will stop the entire conversation and say, Bob, that is not okay.
They ruin the mood to save the principal.
Exactly. And while that is scary, it's also incredibly safe. You never have to guess if a FASN likes you or hates you.
That's true.
If they have a problem, they tell you to your face. If they are fighting with you, it's often because they care about the relationship enough to actually try and fix it. They value authenticity way above comfort.
So if I am a business leader and I see this profile on a resume emotional breaker, I might be a little scared. It sounds like a human resources nightmare waiting to happen. But the report argues they have immense business value.
You should only be scared if you are running a dishonest or stagnant company.
Wow, okay.
Seriously, if you want growth, you need a FASN, but you have to place them correctly.
Let's run through the recommended fields from the report. First up, high interaction frontline and service environments.
Think about customer disputes. A customer is angry, yelling, highly emotional. A logical, cold employee will just make that customer madder.
Oh, absolutely. Nothing worse than being told to calm down.
Exactly. But a FASN, they can match that energy safely. They can say, you are absolutely right to be upset. This is unfair, and I'm going to fix it.
They validate the emotion and fight for the customer.
They turn the conflict into connection.
What about internal communication? That's another recommended area.
They're the ultimate silo busters. In big corporations, departments just stop talking to each other. Yeah. Politics take over.
The polite silence again.
Right. And the FASN is the one brave enough to walk into the cross-department meeting and say, marketing isn't talking to engineering, and it's killing our product. They break the stagnation.
The report also mentions organizational environments needing authentic voice.
The whistleblower. The change agent.
Yeah.
If a company culture has become toxic or if leadership has lost its way,
Yeah.
the FASN is the alarm system. They're the only ones with the courage to point out that the emperor has no clothes.
So they are undeniably essential. But we still have that problem of the explosion. If you are a FASN listening to this, how do you stop the explode, repair, guild cycle? You don't want to burn out.
The answer is in the conclusion of the report. There is a gold sentence here that basically unlocks the whole profile.
Let's hear it.
When the emotional breaker learns to give rhythm and circulation to emotion, fire is no longer just impact, but becomes the ignition source that lets systems restart and continue advancing.
Rhythm and circulation, that is very different from suppression.
It is the exact opposite of suppression. Suppression is the dam that leads to the destructive flood. Circulation is a river. The core advice here is don't wait.
Don't wait for the pressure to hit 100%.
Exactly. When you feel that first flicker of heat, that 10% annoyance that something is unfair, speak then.
So instead of flipping the table once a month, you just nudge the table back into place every single day.
That's it. You shorten the feedback loop. You say, hey, that didn't feel right immediately.
By giving the emotion rhythm.
Right. By giving it rhythm, you become a consistent source of energy and correction rather than a unpredictable, destructive explosion. You transform from just a braider into an igniter.
An igniter. You use the fire to start the engine, not burn down the entire garage.
Precisely. You become the person who keeps this system honest, who keeps things moving, who champions the truth. But you do it in a way that people can actually hear and process.
That is such a hopeful place to land. It turns the perceived weakness of emotion into a literal superpower of leadership.
And honestly, look at the world right now. In business, in politics, in our communities, we have plenty of people who are polite, calculating, and willing to look the other way.
You really don't need more silence.
No. We need more breakers. We need people who care enough to make it awkward.
We need the fever to fight the infection.
We really do.
Well, if you have been nodding along to this, feeling seen, or maybe realizing that your difficult colleague is actually just a FASN trying to save the ship, then you need to dig deeper. This insight comes from the Max Energy ME80 personality assessment.
It's a profound system because it doesn't just tell you what you are, it explains the energy mechanics of why you function that way. It turns judgment into true understanding.
You can find your own profile and explore the full system at the official website. That's www.maxenergylife.com.
And if you want to connect with others and learn more, there are great communities out there. You can search on Facebook for the Chinese terms, Max Energy Essen or Mid Energy Essen.
It's always better to learn with a tribe. So to all the emotional breakers out there listening, your voice, that loud, intense, sometimes messy voice, is not a mistake. It is a necessary part of the ecosystem.
Don't let the world silence you. Just learn to circulate the fire.
Here is a final thought to mull over before we go. What if your most uncomfortable emotion, the one you've been told to hide your whole career, is actually the exact compass your organization is desperately missing? Thanks for joining our deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.